Hey, what's up everyone? This is part 8 in our series called Rhythms, where we've been talking through some of the life practices of Jesus, and we've hopefully been putting them into practice in our own lives. And today, as we wrap discussion on the practices, the spiritual disciplines, just want to take a moment to reflect together, to reflect as our group on some of the practices we've talked through. And I want to invite you right out of the gate, as we wrap today, remember that we've just scratched the surface, that we've really just used this as an introduction to the spiritual disciplines, an introduction to some of the core practices of Jesus. But not only are there so many others that will bring life to our lifestyles, that will bring life to our everyday and weekly basis, there are also so many more things to explore within each discipline. We've only scratched the surface on some of these practices. So I want to invite you not just to, hey, let's take a few more weeks on your own to study the practices, but make a lifelong goal of yours to explore and to deepen your practice in these different disciplines. Is what we want to do. Hopefully when this series of discussions ends, we hope that those rhythms don't end as well. What we've wanted from the very beginning is not just a bunch of knowledge about the disciplines, about the practices, but we wanted a rhythm of life built on the practices of Jesus, which will draw us closer to Him. And as we finish up this series today, there's one more thing we got to talk about. What kind of structure can we build in that will keep the rhythms with us, the practices with us for the long haul? And that is what we call a rule of life, a rule of life. And this term might be totally new to you. Maybe you're like, I've never really heard of that. But maybe even the word rule for you is already a turn off. You're like, okay, I don't need more rules in my life. Maybe that's you. But rule is probably the most accurate translation from the original word that we translated from, which is honestly less of a rule like we might often think about it. It's more like a trellis that somebody would build in their garden for the vines to crawl up and the fruit to have plenty of space to grow. It's like that. It's like a trellis. That's what this rule we're talking about is like. And so as we build a rule of life, this is building a structure for us to flourish and to grow. Jesus said this in John chapter 15. He said, "Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." A rule of life is a structure that helps us bear more fruit. Practically, a rule of life is a consistent routine focused around the practices of Jesus. It's an intentional rhythm of life of incorporating the spiritual disciplines on a daily and weekly basis. Now, probably every single one of us has built some form of a rule of life, but we probably haven't used those terms. But we've built some kind of rhythm or structure or routine around set goals that we want to see, right? Maybe you went on a diet before and you said, okay, I'm going to track everything I eat. Here are the things I can eat. Here are the things I can't. Here's maybe when I'm going to eat. You have a whole plan. Maybe it's a workout regimen that you incorporated into your life. You're saying, I'm going to go to the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and here are the exercises I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure I get enough sleep. I'm going to bed then, I'm waking up now, right? You practiced it all out. Maybe you were learning an instrument. You're saying, I'm going to practice every single day at 8 a.m. for 1 hour, and here's what's going to look like. We've all built rhythms and rules of sorts for ourselves, but oftentimes it's used for some of those. Maybe it's a physical goal I have or artistic goal I have. Yet, we so rarely do the same for our spiritual formation. Paul said it this way: physical training is good, but training for godliness is much better, promising benefits in this life and in the life to come. As you consider building a rule of life for yourself, consider the practices we've talked about over the past couple months. Abiding prayer, intercessory prayer, study, fasting, meditation, rest. I throw others in that we never really actually got to in this discussion because there's so many practices out there. Things like community and worship and service. And maybe you already have those practices built into your weekly rhythm of life. Maybe sitting in the group right now is how you practice community with other people. Maybe you have service projects that you're a part of on a regular basis. But there's so many other practices. As you look at this list of practices that we've talked through, ask yourself the question, where do these practices fit into your daily life, into your weekly routine? And then ask, what would it look like to build a routine that centers around these practices? And that might look very different for other people. For every one of us, a rule of life might look different. For many of us, it might be, hey, you know what? I'm setting aside an hour every morning in which I'm going to spend time in prayer. I'm going to spend time to study and meditate. And I got it planned out for maybe Thursday afternoon. There's a perfect gap. That's where I'm studying. And then on the weekends, I'm building in maybe it's a 24-hour period where I'm going to fast, and another 24-hour period where I'm going to rest. What does your rule of life look like? It can mold and flex for so many of us, but what's most important is that we build that structure. We build that rule of life that creates intentional space for us to see the desired outcome, our spiritual formation. There are a couple steps for each one of us as we explore building a rule of life, and they're very simple, but they each take intentionality and consistency. Simply, number one is sitting down and developing a routine. What is your daily life? What is your weekly schedule? What does your monthly routine look like? And how can you, yes, create space? That means moving things out of the way. Create space so that you can build in each one of these practices, developing a routine and a regimen of spiritual formation for yourself. It's going to take each one of us sitting down on our own and building something. Secondly, it means being diligent. As you build new rhythms and habits, it will take time. Just with every new workout routine, it doesn't come immediately. It takes practice and patience and consistency, showing up day after day after day until the new habit, the new way of life is formed. And third, it means remaining flexible to adapt your rule of life as life itself ebbs and flows. A rule of life is not intended to be what we often associate rules to be. It's not intended to be a rigid structure that's oppressive, but simply one that's life-giving. And so how, as life moves and flows, can I adjust and adapt this rule to, as in many ways I can, build in the practices, these life-giving practices of Jesus? I want to invite you for the next few moments, spend some time in your group, just processing and reflecting over the past couple months, some of the practices we've talked about. Ask the question, what practice, maybe for you, really connected to you? Maybe there was one that just simply, immediately, the idea of it brought you to life and got you excited. It was easy to build in. Maybe on the other side, what was a practice that was like, I've never heard of that before, it seems strange, and I'm still having a hard time building in it, but I'm working at it. And then take some time. Maybe share a little bit. You may not have solid plans in mind, but maybe you already have somewhat of a rule of life that you already practice on a regular basis. And what would it look like? What might it look like for you as you build a rule of life for yourself? An intentional structure for spiritual formation. As we each set out to build a way of life centered around the lifestyle rhythms of Jesus, there should be three primary goals in mind. And as a result, we'll have the same three beautiful outcomes: to be with Jesus, to become like Jesus, and to do what Jesus did.